Before I tell you this story, let me ask you something. Have you ever seen arrogance so strong that it blinds a man from the truth right in front of him? This is not just another tale about wealth and pride. It's about how a single night can turn the tables in ways no one expects. And that's why you need to subscribe right now, because stories like this remind us how quickly life can change. And tell us in the comments, from which city are you watching this video? The chandeliers blazed with golden light, casting their glow over the marble floors of a mansion so extravagant it felt like a palace stolen from another century. Crystal glasses clinked, laughter echoed in waves, and violins played softly in the corner. Music meant to remind everyone present that they were in the presence of wealth, power, and untouchable privilege. At the center of it all, a tall man in an immaculate suit stood like a king among pawns. His voice carried easily over the chatter, sharp with arrogance, sharp with the confidence of someone who had never once been told no in his life. His smile wasn't warm, it was a weapon. Every joke he told left someone else smaller, weaker, and more embarrassed. And tonight, his target was a girl who didn't belong. She stood near the edges of the room, her dress plain against the ocean of silks and diamonds, her hands folded carefully as if she were holding herself together. She hadn't been invited to show off. She hadn't come to dazzle. She had come because someone, somehow, had slipped her into this glittering den of lions. And now, under the weight of every eye in the room, she was forced to speak. You? The man's laughter sliced through the air as he pointed his champagne flute in her direction. You say you can speak. What was it? 9 languages? 9. The crowd leaned in. Some smirked. Others whispered. She lifted her chin, trying to steady her breath. Though her heart pounded so violently, she wondered if everyone could hear it. Yes, she said softly, but her voice carried. 9. The man threw his head back and roared with laughter, the sound bouncing off the walls, joined quickly by others desperate to follow his lead. 9 languages. And yet here you stand, in that dress, eating food you could never afford, pretending you belong here? My dear, fluency doesn't make you valuable. Money does, and you clearly have none. The humiliation pressed down on her like a storm. Every pair of eyes stabbed her. The violin seemed cruel now, the music mocking her silence. She could have walked away. She could have bowed her head. But instead, she said something that froze the laughter. Would you like me to prove it? The words sliced through the crowd's noise. For a moment, even the man was startled into silence. Then, a smirk curved across his lips. Prove it, he said, circling her now like a predator. Very well, but I don't need you to repeat a few phrases in French or German to amuse us. No, let's give you something impossible. He snapped his fingers, and from the shadows, a servant hurried forward, holding a weathered, yellow document sealed in cracked wax. The moment it appeared, whispers rippled through the guests. The parchment was infamous, an heirloom rumored to be centuries old, written in a script no one had ever deciphered. For years, it had sat like a decoration in the Millionaire's study, admired but useless. Translate this, he said, placing it in her hands. If you fail, you leave my house this instant, and we all forget this ridiculous little claim of yours. If you succeed, he smirked, certain she would not. Then perhaps I'll believe you. But don't hope too much. The paper trembled in her fingers. She could feel the stares, the expectation of her failure pressing against her chest like iron. She closed her eyes, inhaled, and began to read. At first, it was nothing but symbols looping characters that seemed impossible. Then, slowly, her lips parted, and in a clear, calm voice, she began to translate aloud. Word after word, sentence after sentence. The crowd fell silent. Gasps filled the air as her voice carried the meaning of the forgotten text, a tale that no one had expected. It spoke of betrayal, of hidden wealth, of secrets buried within the very foundations of the millionaire's empire. A warning left behind by ancestors, promising that the fortune that glittered around them was tainted by lies. By the time she finished, her voice steady, the room was no longer laughing. The millionaire's smile was gone. His face had turned pale, his hand tightening around the stem of his glass until it cracked. Because in that moment, everyone understood. This girl, humiliated only minutes ago, had just become dangerous. The violin stopped. The laughter was gone. And in the silence, one thought pierced the air like a knife. What secret had she just uncovered? And what would it mean for the empire built upon it? The silence that followed her last translated word was unbearable. You could hear the ticking of the grandfather clock across the hall, slow and heavy, like a countdown to something none of them were ready for. The millionaire's grip on a shattered glass left a thin line of blood trickling across his hand, though he seemed not to notice. His eyes were locked on her, cold and filled with something no one had ever seen in him before: fear. The crowd began to stir. Soft whispers curled through the air like smoke. Did you hear what she said? It cannot be true, can it? The document was nothing but decoration. Guests who moments before had been laughing now leaned away from him, their admiration cracking like fragile porcelain. Some looked at the girl with awe, others with suspicion. But all of them felt the weight of what had just been spoken. The empire surrounding them might be a throne built on sand. The girl lowered the parchment, her hands trembling though her voice had not faltered. She felt the burn of every gaze, some sharp as knives, others soft with something that resembled pity. She wanted to disappear into the crowd, to vanish before the walls closed in, but she knew too well that it was already too late. The man took a step forward, his voice cutting like steel. Do you understand what you've done? She flinched but stood her ground. I only read what was written. Laughter erupted again, but this time it wasn't his. It came from the far side of the room, a low, knowing laugh, dripping with irony. Heads turned. A figure leaned casually against the balcony railing, watching with narrowed eyes. A man, older, dressed in darker tones, someone who clearly didn't belong to the circle of shining jewels and shallow smiles. His presence was unsettling, as though he'd been waiting for this exact moment. So, the stranger said, his voice loud enough to be heard. After all these years, the truth comes back to haunt you. The millionaire's jaw clenched. His arrogance returned, thin but sharp, like glass about to shatter. You, he hissed, are not welcome here. The stranger ignored him. His eyes turned to the girl, and in them she saw something dangerous: recognition. Where did you learn to read such language? Her throat tightened. She hadn't expected this question. Not now, not here. Memories flashed. Long nights under dim lamps, books borrowed and returned in secrecy, the quiet encouragement of a voice she hadn't heard in years. A face from her past. But she didn't answer. Not yet. The millionaire snatched the parchment from her hands, crumpling it in his fist as though he could erase the words with sheer will. Enough, he barked, his voice trembling under the weight of his fury. This charade is over. Everyone back to their drinks. The girl will leave at once. Yet no one moved. The violins, waiting for a signal, did not play. The servants stood frozen at the edges. And the guests, wealthy, ruthless, accustomed to bowing at his every command, now only stared at him with unease. The mask of power had cracked, and they could smell weakness. The girl tried to step back, but the stranger's gaze held her like chains. His words were calm, but heavy with intent. You may not realize it yet, he told her, but what you uncovered tonight is bigger than you think. Bigger than him. And now it involves you. Her breath caught in her chest. For the first time, she realized she was no longer just a guest at the wrong party. She had become the center of a game she didn't understand, a game that had just begun. And in the millionaire's pale face, twisted in rage and fear, one truth glimmered clear. He would destroy her before letting her reveal more. The millionaire's fist crushed the parchment so tightly that the wax seal split, fragments of it falling like red blood onto the marble. His eyes darted over the room, searching for control, for dominance. But the more he shouted, the clearer it became. The control was gone. His words were desperate. You will forget what you heard tonight, he barked, raising his voice above the whispers. This nonsense, this myth, it means nothing. Nothing. But people were no longer listening to him. They were listening to her. The girl stood frozen, the words of the ancient script still echoing in her mind. They hadn't been just words. They had been warnings. Promises. A prophecy written by men long dead, meant for those who would inherit this wealth. A prophecy that had remained untouched for centuries until it fell into her hands. And what it said chilled her even now. What is built on blood shall drown in blood. The walls of this house carry voices, and they will speak again when the time comes. She hadn't dared to say that part aloud. Her lips parted as if to repeat it, but the millionaire saw the flicker in her eyes and roared before she could speak. "Get her out of my sight." Two guards moved from the shadows. Their heavy steps struck against the marble like thunder. But before they could seize her, the stranger stepped forward. His hand rested casually on the railing, yet his presence was enough to make them hesitate. His voice, calm and deliberate, rang through the silence. "Touch her, and every person in this room will wonder why you are so afraid of what she knows." The guests gasped, shifting uncomfortably. The millionaire's mask cracked again, a shadow of panic flickering across his features. He could not afford weakness, not in front of them, but he also could not afford for her to speak again. The girl's chest tightened. She wasn't supposed to be here. She wasn't supposed to know any of this. But now, it seemed as though every breath she took drew her deeper into something ancient, dangerous, and unstoppable. The stranger turned to her, his gaze steady, like someone who had seen this all before. "You didn't just translate words tonight," he said softly, though everyone heard him. "You woke up the past, and the past has a price." She wanted to deny it, to walk away, but the memory of the script burned behind her eyes. The curse, the betrayal, the hint of a hidden chamber beneath the estate. It was all too vivid to dismiss. Then the lights flickered. Once, twice. The chandeliers above trembled, their golden glow dimming as though the mansion itself were listening. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Glasses clinked. Someone whispered a prayer. The millionaire slammed his fist on the table. Enough of this madness. His voice cracked, echoing louder than he intended. He gestured violently at the guards again. "Take her away." The girl's heart pounded. She felt the walls closing in. And then, a sound erupted from somewhere deep beneath the mansion. A hollow, guttural groan, like stone grinding against stone. It rolled up through the floor, shaking the marble beneath their feet. The chandeliers swayed. Guests screamed as wine sloshed from crystal glasses, staining dresses worth fortunes. The girl's knees weakened. She knew. Something buried had just stirred. The stranger smiled faintly, as if he had been waiting for this moment all along. His words dropped like a hammer. "The house has remembered." The marble floor quivered beneath their feet, as if the very foundations of the mansion were alive, breathing, warning. Screams burst from the crowd. Ladies clutched their pearls. Men stumbled over velvet chairs, and the once perfect harmony of wealth and laughter turned into chaos. The millionaire barked orders, his voice desperate to mask the tremor of fear in it. "Stay calm. This house has stood for generations. It is nothing." But his words fell empty. No one believed him anymore. The girl stood frozen, the parchment still glowing in her memory. Each line, each symbol seemed to vibrate inside her chest as though the house itself was reciting them back to her. "What is built on blood shall drown in blood." Her lips trembled as the words whispered inside her mind, louder now, insistent. The stranger did not flinch. He remained at the edge of the balcony, watching the panic with cold, knowing eyes. And when the lights flickered again, plunging the grand hall into a brief darkness, his silhouette was the only thing steady, like a shadow that belonged more to the house than to the men inside it. "Do you feel it?" he asked, his voice calm, steady, a knife through the noise. "The walls are speaking. They've waited centuries for this night." The girl's heart pounded so loudly it drowned the screaming around her. She could barely breathe. What is down there?" she whispered, though her voice cracked. The stranger tilted his head, almost in pity. "The truth. The one your words woke from its grave." The millionaire turned on him, his face twisted in rage, desperation, and something worse, fear. You're nothing but a leech, feeding on rumors, poisoning my guests with your filth." He turned sharply to the guards. Sees him too. Both of them out. The guards moved, but again, hesitation flickered in their eyes. The ground beneath their boots trembled, the chandeliers above clattered like glass teeth, and in the midst of this unnatural tremor, one of the massive paintings on the wall, an oil portrait of a stern ancestor, fell with a thunderous crash. Behind it, revealed in the gaping hole of plaster and wood, was something no one expected. A door, small, ancient, ironbound. Its edges glowed faintly as though the very act of being uncovered had awakened it. Dust billowed, thick and choking, but the outline was unmistakable. A hidden passage, sealed and forgotten, standing in the heart of the mansion. The crowd gasped. The millionaire's face drained of all color. The stranger's lips curved into the faintest smile. There it is, he murmured. The heart of your empire, and the beginning of its end. The girl stared, her breath catching. The curse, the prophecy, it was all real. And somehow, she knew it had been waiting for her. The millionaire's voice broke the moment, sharp and commanding, though it trembled beneath its anger. No one touches that door. Do you hear me? No one. But the guests no longer listened. They whispered, eyes darting between him, the girl, and the glowing door, as though the very air around them demanded an answer. And in the center of it all, the girl felt her knees weaken, not from fear, but from an inexplicable pull, an invisible chain dragging her toward that door. Because deep down, in the marrow of her bones, she knew the door had not been waiting for the millionaire. It had been waiting for her. The chaos in the ballroom did not subside. It grew heavier, thicker, as if the mansion itself had trapped every sound within its walls and was feeding on the fear. Crystal glasses shattered under trembling hands, silk gowns snagged against gilded chairs as women stumbled, and men who were once towering with pride found themselves pale, their voices breaking into panicked murmurs. But all eyes inevitably returned to the thing no one could ignore, the ancient door, revealed like a wound in the mansion's flesh. Its surface, bound by rusted iron and wood so dark it seemed charred, pulsed faintly as though it drew breath. Dust fell in slow streams from the ceiling above, catching the glimmer of chandeliers that flickered and fought against the growing darkness. The girl felt herself rooted to the floor, though every nerve inside her screamed to run. The air was heavy with something she couldn't explain, a pull, a call. Her fingertips itched, her chest rose and fell faster, and her pulse throbbed in her ears louder than the violins had ever played. She didn't just see the door, she felt it. The millionaire staggered forward, desperate to reclaim the authority slipping from his grip. His voice, once smooth and cruel, now cracked as it rose over the murmuring crowd. This house, this family, this fortune. He pointed toward the door, his hand shaking despite his attempt to steady it. None of it belongs to superstition or curses. That door is a meaningless relic. Do you hear me? Meaningless. But no one moved. No one nodded. The silence that answered him was more damning than any accusation. For the first time, the guests who had always bowed before him looked at him not with reverence, but with doubt. The stranger stepped down from the balcony, his boots slow and deliberate against the marble. He crossed the ballroom as though the tremors did not touch him, his gaze fixed only on the door. His presence commanded attention in a way the millionaire's gold never could. It was never meaningless, the stranger said, his voice low, dangerous. Your ancestors hid it because they feared it, and they feared it for good reason. The girl's breath caught. The parchment's words returned, fragments spinning in her mind like a chant. What is built on blood shall drown in blood. The walls will speak again. And as her eyes locked on the faint glow bleeding from the edges of the door, she realized something horrifying. The words were not metaphor. They were prophecy. The millionaire snapped, his control unraveling. Enough of this. He turned on the guards, his voice shrill now. Seal it up. Burn it down if you must, but no one touches that door. The guards exchanged uneasy glances. Their hands hovered over weapons, but their bodies betrayed hesitation. It wasn't loyalty holding them back. It was fear. fear of the trembling beneath their boots, fear of the door that seemed alive. And then, a sound silenced the room once more. A whisper. It didn't come from a guest, nor from the stranger, nor from the girl. It came from the door itself. A breathy murmur, soft but unmistakable, like voices speaking from behind thick stone. The language was the same as the parchment, twisted and ancient, but the girl understood it. The translation formed in her head without effort, and it was enough to make her knees buckle. The blood of the arrogant will be claimed. The key has been found. Her lips parted, her eyes wide with terror. She staggered back, but the stranger's hand caught her arm firmly, grounding her in place. His gaze, though grim, held no fear. "You hear it, don't you?" he whispered. "It speaks to you." She nodded, trembling, unable to deny it. The millionaire, watching the exchange, saw in her eyes what no one else could: recognition. He lunged forward, his face twisted with rage and desperation, his voice breaking into an animalistic roar. "You will say nothing. You will not speak." He reached for her, his blood-streaked hand outstretched. But before he could touch her, the ground beneath the door split with a thunderous crack. Dust exploded outward as the hinges screeched, and the ancient wood shuddered violently. The whispers grew louder, rising into a chorus that filled every corner of the grand hall. Guests screamed and stumbled over each other, some fleeing toward the massive front doors, others frozen in terror. The girl pressed her hands to her ears, but it was useless. The voices weren't just around her, they were inside her. They poured meaning into her skull, line after line of revelation, until she thought her head might break apart. The stranger's grip tightened on her arm. "Listen carefully," he said, his tone urgent but steady, as if guiding her through a storm. "It's not cursing you. It's choosing you." Her knees gave out, and she collapsed to the floor. But even on her hands and knees, she couldn't stop staring at the door, which now seemed to glow brighter, its cracks leaking a faint red light that looked too much like blood. The millionaire bellowed again, his voice raw, stripped of its former elegance. "Get her away from it. She will destroy us all." And then, suddenly, the door stopped. The glow faded. The tremors ceased. The whispers cut off mid-chorus, plunging the ballroom into an unnatural silence. Everyone held their breath. The chandeliers swayed one last time before going still. Dust settled on the broken portrait's frame. The girl remained on the ground, her chest heaving, her skin damp with sweat. Slowly, her eyes lifted to the stranger. What does it want from me?" she whispered. The stranger crouched beside her, his eyes never leaving the door. His reply was soft, almost mournful. "It wants what was promised centuries ago." The millionaire's face twisted, his mask of control shattered, replaced by naked panic. He pointed at her with shaking hands, spitting words between clenched teeth. "She's the key. Don't you see? If she opens it, everything we built will be undone." And in that moment, as every eye in the room turned toward her, the girl understood something terrifying. The door had chosen her, and the empire of the arrogant man, standing above her, was about to fall. The silence after the whispers cut off was heavier than the tremors that had shaken the marble floor. It was the kind of silence that made hearts race faster, that made sweat cling to the back of every neck, that pressed on the chest until breathing became a conscious effort. No one in that ballroom could look away from the girl. Not the guests who moments ago had been laughing and drinking. Not the guards whose hands hovered over their weapons but refused to draw them. Not even the millionaire whose fury had collapsed into something rawer, something uglier: fear. The girl still knelt on the floor, her palms pressed against the cold marble as if clinging to it for strength. Her chest heaved, her hair stuck to her damp face, and her eyes, wide, trembling, alive, remained locked on the door that seemed to breathe in silence. She had not asked for this. She had not asked for any of it. She had come as a guest, unwanted and mocked. And now every soul in the room waited for her next breath, as if her very existence had become a verdict. The stranger crouched beside her, his presence steady, a shadow that refused to waver even when the world tilted. His voice was calm, low enough for her to hear, but loud enough for the silence to carry it. You hear it because it recognizes you. You are the blood it was promised. The key. Her throat tightened. The key to what? He did not answer immediately. His gaze lingered on the cracks around the ancient iron-bound door, then shifted to the millionaire, whose face twitched with rage and terror. Only then did he return his eyes to her, and his words came like the tolling of a distant bell. To the truth buried under this house. To the sins that bought its gold. The girl's lips parted. The parchment. The prophecy. What is built on blood shall drown in blood. Her chest ached as the words returned, sharper now, cutting her thoughts into fragments. She whispered, almost to herself, "It's real. All of it." The millionaire broke then, unable to bear the weight of their silence. He stepped forward, his voice exploding with a desperation that shattered what remained of his dignity. "She is lying," he roared, his voice cracking. "And nobody, a parasite, a girl dragged in from the streets to humiliate me in my own house. Do you not see? She is trying to destroy us." But his words rang hollow. The guests did not cheer him. They did not rush to his side. They watched him with unease, with suspicion, their loyalty faltering. One by one, the masks of admiration slipped from their faces, replaced by something new, fear of the man who had always been untouchable. The girl rose shakily to her feet, the stranger's hand steadying her as she swayed. Her voice was weak, but it carried, slicing through the millionaire's frantic cries. "I didn't come here for this. I didn't ask for this. But I understand it. That door, it wasn't waiting for you." Her eyes locked on his, steady now. "It was waiting for me." The words were simple, but they struck like a blade. A ripple tore through the guests, gasping, murmuring, some even stepping away from the millionaire as though his corruption might stain them. The man's face turned red, then pale. He stepped toward her, his voice shaking, desperate to reclaim what he had lost. "Do you know what you're saying? Do you even understand what that means? If you open it," his words caught in his throat. For the first time, he seemed unable to speak. The stranger finished the thought for him, his voice low and deliberate. "If she opens it, the empire your family built on lies and blood will crumble, and the world will see you for what you are." The millionaire lunged toward the girl, his eyes wild, but the stranger intercepted, his arm shooting out like iron, forcing the man back a step. The guests gasped. No one had ever dared touch him before. The tension in the room was unbearable. The girl's chest rose and fell, her gaze flicking between the two men, the door, and the watching crowd. The prophecy pounded in her mind. She could not escape it. She could not deny it. Then the lights died. Darkness swallowed the ballroom. Screams erupted. Crystal shattered against marble. And from the door came a sound so guttural, so ancient, it silenced even terror. A heartbeat. Slow, heavy, inhuman. Boom. The chandeliers rattled. Boom. The floor trembled. Boom. The girl gasped as her own heartbeat synchronized with it, pounding against her ribs like a drum of fate. And then she heard it again. Not from the door. From inside her. A voice that was not hers, speaking the same ancient tongue she had translated only minutes before. Blood calls to blood. The key has been found. The seal will break. Her hands trembled violently. She clutched her chest as if trying to stop the voice from bursting out of her, but it was useless. The words spilled from her lips, spoken in that forgotten tongue, her voice layered with something older, deeper, terrifying. Gasps tore through the crowd. People stumbled back, crossing themselves, whispering prayers. The guards froze, unable to step closer, unable to flee. The millionaire screamed, "Stop her!" But no one moved. The chandeliers blazed back to life with a violent surge of light, flooding the ballroom in gold. The girl stood in the center, her body trembling, her lips moving though her own mind begged her to stop. She wasn't speaking anymore. She was channeling. And the door listened. Its edges glowed red again, brighter, pulsing in rhythm with her voice. Dust fell in thick clouds, and the iron bands groaned, straining as if ready to burst. The stranger watched her with grim recognition. "It has begun," he whispered. The millionaire's knees buckled. For the first time, he looked like a man undone, small, terrified, fragile. And the girl, once mocked and humiliated, now stood as the epicenter of something vast and unstoppable. When her voice finally stopped, silence gripped the room once more. She collapsed forward, the stranger catching her before she hit the floor. Her body shook violently, her face pale as death. Her whisper barely carried, but it was enough. I didn't open it, but it's waiting for me to finish. The stranger's jaw tightened. His hand lingered on her shoulder, steady, protective. His eyes, however, stayed locked on the trembling door. And then, as if mocking them all, a final whisper seeped from the cracks. This time, every person in the ballroom understood it. No translation required. Tomorrow, the ballroom, once the heart of opulence and arrogance, had turned into a tomb of silence after that final word. Tomorrow. The crowd dispersed in waves of whispers and hurried footsteps, some guests fleeing into the night with pale faces and trembling hands, others lingering in the shadows of the mansion's gilded halls, their curiosity stronger than their fear. The chandeliers no longer glowed with golden warmth. Their light now seemed cold, sterile, a spotlight exposing truths no one wanted to see. The millionaire remained rooted at the center of the room, his once proud frame bent under the invisible weight pressing down on him. His eyes, wild and bloodshot, darted from the ancient door to the girl, and then to the stranger who still stood protectively by her side. He opened his mouth to command, to reclaim the authority slipping like sand between his fingers, but no sound came. The tremor in his jaw betrayed what none had ever seen in him before. He was afraid. The girl sat on a velvet chair at the edge of the room, her hands trembling in her lap, her skin pale as ivory. Her breath was shallow, every exhale heavy with exhaustion. But her eyes had changed. No longer just the eyes of a poor girl mocked in a room full of silk and diamonds. They were the eyes of someone who had seen too much, who carried voices that did not belong to her. Every now and then, her lips parted unconsciously, forming fragments of that ancient tongue, and each time she did, the air seemed to grow heavier, as though the house itself leaned in to listen. The stranger leaned close to her, his tone quiet but deliberate. "You cannot stay here tonight. Tomorrow, it will try to finish what it began." Her gaze snapped to his, her voice thin but sharp with fear. "What if I can't stop it? What if it wants me to open it?" His expression hardened, though his voice was softer. "It doesn't want you to open it. It wants to use you to open itself. There's a difference." She shivered, clutching her arms tightly. "And if I resist?" The stranger's silence was answer enough. The millionaire finally found his voice, but it came out cracked, venomous with desperation. "You," he spat at the stranger. "You brought this curse into my house. You manipulated her, planted these lies." His hand trembled as he pointed at the girl, his words broken by hysteria. "She will not open it. She will leave this place at once. Do you hear me? Out!" The girl flinched but did not move. For the first time, she saw clearly what the others had begun to see. The man's voice, once a command that bent everyone to his will, now rang hollow. He was no longer the master of the room. The mansion itself had stolen his authority. The stranger's reply was low, steady, unshaken. "You cannot command what you do not control." The millionaire lunged, his hands balled into fists, but before he could strike, one of his own guards stepped forward, intercepting him. Not to protect the girl, not to protect the stranger, but to hold him back. The guests gasped, the betrayal heavy in the air. The millionaire stumbled back, his chest heaving, his face contorted in disbelief. "You," he whispered to the guard, his voice breaking. "You dare." But the guard did not meet his eyes. Instead, his gaze flicked nervously to the ancient door, then to the girl, then to the stranger. And in that simple refusal, the empire the millionaire had built began to crumble in plain sight. The girl pushed herself weakly to her feet. "I need to know what it's hiding," she whispered, almost to herself. "I need to know what they buried." The stranger turned sharply toward her, his eyes narrowing. "Curiosity will kill you. Do you understand what lies beneath this house? It is not treasure. It is not glory. It is rot. It is blood. If you open it, he broke off, his jaw tightening as if the words themselves were too dangerous to speak. Her voice trembled, but her resolve grew stronger with each breath. Then teach me how to stop it. The stranger's eyes searched hers for a long moment, as though weighing something invisible between them. Finally, he nodded once, curtly, and leaned closer. You cannot fight it with strength. You cannot fight it with wealth or weapons. The only thing that weakens it is truth. Truth, she echoed. Yes, he said. The truth buried under lies is poison to it. That's why it spoke to you. Because you can unearth what no one else dares. The girl's knees shook, but she lifted her chin, determination carving itself into her expression. The humiliated guest was gone. In her place stood the unwilling key to something vast and terrible. The millionaire staggered back against the marble pillar, his eyes locked on her as if she were a nightmare come alive. His voice dropped to a whisper, raw with hatred. If you open it, you'll destroy everything I've built, everything my family has passed down for generations. You'll burn us all. The stranger's words cut through the tension like a blade. No, she won't destroy it. It will. The girl's hands clenched at her sides. Her heart raced, but not with fear this time, with resolve. The prophecy had chosen her, but perhaps she could choose what came next. And then, just as the guests began to murmur, just as the tension reached a breaking point, a thunderous crash echoed from somewhere deep within the mansion. The chandeliers swayed violently, and plaster rained down from the ceiling. The door had not opened. Not yet, but the house was preparing. The stranger's eyes hardened. He gripped her shoulder. Tomorrow, at nightfall, the seal breaks. If you're still here when it does, you won't leave alive. The millionaire shouted over the chaos, his voice frantic, feral. Then she will not live to see tomorrow. His hand shot toward the pistol hidden beneath his coat. The girl gasped, and before anyone could react, the millionaire raised the weapon and aimed it straight at her chest. The pistol gleamed beneath the chandeliers, its polished steel catching the fractured light of a room already broken by whispers, dust, and fear. Gasps erupted, echoing off marble and glass as the millionaire raised the weapon, his hand trembling not with hesitation, but with the fury of a man whose empire was slipping from his grasp. The guests scattered toward the far corners of the ballroom, their silk and velvet gowns rustling like frightened birds. Some ducked behind towering columns. Others pressed themselves against the gilded walls, their jeweled hands covering their mouths in shock. The girl froze, her heart slamming against her ribs like it was trying to escape her body. The stranger stepped in front of her instinctively, his frame a shield, his voice low and dangerous. Think carefully, he warned, his tone steady despite the gun pointed at them both. If you pull that trigger, you won't kill the curse. You'll feed it. The millionaire's eyes glistened with madness, bloodshot and unblinking. His laughter cracked the silence, sharp and manic. Do you think I care about curses? Do you think I care about prophecies, about whispers, about some girl who pretends to speak the tongue of ghosts? No. His voice rose, shaking with desperation. All I care about is control. And if the price of silence is her life, then so be it. The girl staggered backward, her throat dry, her voice trembling as she tried to speak. I never wanted this. I didn't ask for this. Her plea only ignited his rage further. And yet you dare to stand here, in my house, threatening what my blood built. You think because you can twist your tongue into ancient words, you're more than a beggar, my feast? No, you are nothing. The stranger's gaze darkened. His words fell like a verdict. If you truly believed she was nothing, you wouldn't fear her. The millionaire's jaw clenched. His finger curled on the trigger. Then, the sound exploded. A gunshot tore through the ballroom, louder than thunder, sharper than a scream. The recoil sent the millionaire staggering back a step, his grip tightening around the weapon as smoke curled from its barrel. Guests shrieked, some collapsing to the floor in terror, others covering their ears. The chandeliers shook violently, glass raining down like shards of ice. The girl's breath caught. She braced for pain, for the burn of lead ripping through flesh but it never came. She blinked, trembling, her body intact, because the bullet had never reached her. It hovered midair, inches from her chest, spinning slowly as though trapped in unseen hands. The room fell silent, stunned into stillness. All eyes locked on the impossible sight. A bullet defying time, frozen in the air. The stranger exhaled sharply, his expression grim. The house intervenes, and then, without warning, the bullet dropped to the floor with a metallic clink, harmless. The millionaire staggered forward, disbelief and rage twisting his features. He raised the pistol again, firing a second shot, then a third. Each time, the bullets froze in the air, suspended for a breathless moment before clattering harmlessly to the marble. The echoes of gunfire faded, leaving only gasps and the pounding of terrified hearts. The girl's hands trembled violently. She pressed them to her ears, but it wasn't the sound that terrified her, it was the voices. The whispers had returned, filling her head, filling the room, though no one else could hear them as clearly as she did. Blood of arrogance cannot harm the key. The house protects its own. Her knees weakened. She whispered aloud, not by choice, but because the words forced themselves from her lips. "It's protecting me." The guests stared at her with awe, some crossing themselves, others whispering that she was cursed, chosen, marked. The millionaire, however, fell into a frenzy. His screams were guttural, animalistic. "No, no, this is my house. My house. It will not betray me." He hurled the pistol at the ancient door, the metal clanging against its iron bands before falling uselessly to the ground. His chest heaved, his veins bulged, his eyes burned with desperation. It was never meant for her. It was meant for me. The stranger stepped forward, his presence cutting through the chaos like a blade. That door was never yours. It was sealed against your family, not for it. You lived in its shadow, never in its promise. The girl shook her head, tears burning her eyes as she whispered, "Why me? Why did it choose me?" The stranger's gaze softened, though his voice remained grave. "Because you were never blind to truth. Wealth blinds, pride blinds, but you saw. You listened. You spoke when no one else dared. And now the curse knows your voice." The girl's body trembled, the weight of destiny pressing against her like iron chains. She had been humiliated, mocked, reduced to nothing in their eyes. And yet here she stood, untouched by bullets, chosen by a house that carried the voices of the dead. The millionaire's knees gave way, and he fell to the floor, his hands clutching his head as he screamed, "You'll ruin me. You'll take everything." His voice cracked, pathetic now, pitiful. "Without this house, without this name, I am nothing." The stranger's eyes narrowed. "Then perhaps it is time the world saw you for what you are." The house groaned again, a deep, guttural sound rising from the foundations, shaking the marble and rattling the chandeliers. The guests screamed and fled in a stampede, rushing through the grand doors, abandoning their glasses, their coats, their jewels. The ballroom emptied until only a handful remained. The girl, the stranger, the guards too frozen to move, and the millionaire, broken on his knees. The girl staggered forward, her eyes locked on the ancient door. Its glow was brighter now, red bleeding from its cracks like fire. She could feel it breathing in rhythm with her heart, pulling her closer, demanding. Her voice cracked, heavy with fear and dread. "Tomorrow night it opens." The stranger nodded grimly. "And when it does, you must decide, do you seal it forever, or do you let it consume him?" His eyes flicked to the trembling millionaire. "Either way, the house has chosen. There is no escape." The girl swallowed hard, her throat dry, her body trembling. She stared at the door, its whispers wrapping around her mind like chains. She had no wealth, no power, no reason to be here. Yet she stood as the one who could either end a curse centuries old or unleash it upon them all. And in the silence that followed, broken only by the millionaire's sobs, the girl realized one terrifying truth. Tomorrow, she would not only face the house, she would face herself. The once crowded mansion now lay eerily hollow, where laughter, clinking glasses, and the hum of violins had filled the air hours before. There was only emptiness, an echo of fear lingering in the velvet curtains and marble halls. The grand ballroom, though deserted, still smelled of smoke from the pistol shots and dust from the fallen plaster. Broken glass sparkled like scattered stars across the floor, reminders of a night that had already become legend among those who fled. The girl had been given a guest room high in the east wing, but sleep refused to come. She sat by the tall window, its curtains drawn back, staring out at the endless darkness beyond the estate. The moon bathed the grounds in silver, and yet, even the night seemed uneasy. Trees swayed though no wind touched them, and shadows moved where none should be. Her mind replayed everything in fragments. The millionaire's mocking laughter, the parchment's warning, the whispers that had forced their way from her lips, the bullets frozen midair. None of it made sense. She was a poor girl, forgotten, dismissed, a nobody. And yet the house, this curse, this prophecy, had chosen her. Why? Her reflection in the glass window answered nothing. Her eyes looked older, tired, but behind them something stirred, something that wasn't entirely her own. She hugged herself tightly, as though her arms could keep the voices at bay. But even in silence, she heard them, soft, murmuring fragments of that ancient tongue. The seal breaks at nightfall. The key must choose. Her breath caught. She whispered to herself, almost begging, "Why me?" But the shadows gave no reply. Meanwhile, in the west wing, the millionaire had locked himself in his study. The pistol lay broken on the desk, useless, mocking him. His hands shook as he poured another glass of brandy, though his throat burned from the last. His reflection in the polished cabinet glass was unrecognizable. Sweat-matted hair, eyes swollen with rage, lips trembling like those of a frightened child. He slammed the glass down, brandy splashing across papers and maps. "It's mine," he whispered hoarsely to the empty room. "All of it is mine. This house, this fortune, this legacy, mine." But even as he spoke, the walls groaned, the wood panels creaked, and his voice seemed small compared to the sound of the house breathing around him. He pressed his palms to his ears, shaking his head violently. "No, no, no. You will not betray me. Not for her." His eyes darted to the crumpled parchment still lying on the floor where he had dropped it earlier. Slowly, he picked it up, smoothing its edges with trembling fingers. The words stared back at him, the symbols he could not read. He snarled, slamming his fist against the desk. "I don't need to read it. I know what it says. It lies. Lies." But then a whisper, low, slithering, rising from the cracks of the study floorboards. "What is built on blood shall drown in blood." The millionaire froze. The voice was not hers, not the girl's, not the stranger's. It was older, darker, crawling beneath his skin. He stumbled back, knocking over a lamp, brandy spilling like blood across the desk. His chest heaved as he clutched at it, as though the voice had gripped his heart. He fell to his knees, sobbing now. "No, no. I built this. I deserve this. Don't take it from me." But the house did not answer. The silence was louder than his pleas. Elsewhere, the stranger paced the corridors like a sentinel. He had refused to leave the girl unguarded, aware that the millionaire's desperation made him more dangerous than the curse itself. Every few steps, he paused, listening to the house groan and whisper, his eyes narrowing as though calculating its every breath. He found her still by the window, her face pale, her body tense. He stood in the doorway for a moment before speaking softly. "You should rest." She shook her head, not turning to him. "How can I? Tomorrow, everything ends." He walked closer, his footsteps quiet against the thick rug. "Tomorrow, everything begins." Finally, she turned to him, her voice breaking. "You talk as if I have a choice. But I don't. It's already chosen me. I can feel it. Every time I close my eyes, I hear it calling." He crouched beside her chair, his eyes steady, his tone grave. "Yes, it calls to you. But you're not its puppet. You're its key. And keys do more than open doors. They can also lock them." Her chest tightened. The weight of his words settled in her bones. "And if I lock it, what happens?" He hesitated. His silence was heavier than any answer. Finally, He whispered, "Then it takes something in return." Her lips parted, fear flashing in her eyes. "What?" His gaze softened, almost mournful. "The key itself." Her breath caught. She shook her head violently. "No, no, I won't." He placed a firm hand on her arm, steadying her trembling body. "Listen to me. You have survived humiliation, cruelty, and scorn. You stood when others would have bowed. That strength is why it chose you. But strength alone won't save you tomorrow. You must decide what you're willing to sacrifice." Tears welled in her eyes, slipping silently down her cheeks. She turned back to the window, staring at the restless night. She had nothing, no wealth, no family, no legacy to leave behind. But now, for the first time, she had something greater, the power to end a curse centuries old. And it might demand her life. As dawn crept across the horizon, the mansion remained restless, its walls sighing, its floors groaning, its air thick with tension. The guests who had fled spread rumors through the city, stories of frozen bullets and whispers in dead languages. By morning, the entire town buzzed with talk of the cursed house. By noon, people gathered outside the gates, pointing at the mansion with fear and awe. And by dusk, the mansion would awaken. The girl remained by the window as the sky bled into crimson, knowing the sun's descent was the countdown. The stranger prepared in silence, his hand never far from the hilt of the blade his belt, though even he knew steel could do nothing against what was coming. The millionaire did not emerge from his study all day, but when he finally staggered into the hall near sundown, his eyes were red, his suit disheveled, and his hands clutched a rusted key, the only key he had left, a relic from his ancestors. His face twisted with madness, he whispered hoarsely, "If she opens it, I'll kill her myself. If she locks it, I'll drag her to the grave." The girl, hearing his voice from the corridor, closed her eyes and whispered to herself, steadying her trembling hands. "Tonight it ends." The last rays of the sun bled across the horizon like a wound, staining the sky in hues of crimson and violet. As darkness crept in, the mansion groaned as though it too knew the weight of what was coming. Its stained glass windows flickered with dying light. Its walls exhaled in long sighs, and the very air grew heavier with every passing minute. The ground outside trembled in pulses, subtle at first, like a drumbeat buried deep beneath the earth, then stronger, as though something enormous stirred in the foundations. Inside the mansion, silence held the halls in a strangling grip. The guests were gone. The servants had vanished. Even the city outside, once filled with gossip and speculation, now dared not approach the gates after sundown. All that remained inside the golden prison were three souls bound to fate: the girl, the stranger, and the man who once called himself master of it all. The girl stood at the far end of the grand ballroom, her figure illuminated by the trembling light of chandeliers that flickered like dying stars. The ancient door loomed before her, more alive now than ever. Its surface pulsed faintly, veins of red light glowing beneath iron bands that strained as if barely able to contain what was trapped within. Dust seeped from its cracks in slow streams, falling like ash. With each pulse of the door's glow, her chest tightened, as if her heart were being pulled into rhythm with it. She clasped her trembling hands together, her voice breaking in a whisper meant only for herself. "Please don't let it be me. Don't let me be the one." But the house heard every word, and the whispers in her mind grew louder, answering in the ancient tongue she wished she didn't understand. The key is the voice. The voice is the blood. The blood is the offering. Her knees weakened. Tears burned her eyes. She could run. She could flee into the night and never return. But deep down, she already knew. The door would follow her. The curse would cling to her. The prophecy would not be denied. The stranger stood a few steps away, his shadow stretched across the marble floor like a shield between her and the door. His hand rested on the hilt of his blade, though even he knew steel was useless. Still, his presence was solid, unshaken, as if his mere willpower could anchor her. He glanced at her with a rare softness in his otherwise unyielding gaze. "When it calls, resist it. Don't let it take your will." That is how it wins. Her lips quivered. And if I can't resist? He looked away, his jaw tight. Then you'll open it. And none of us will survive what lies behind. Before she could respond, heavy footsteps echoed across the ballroom. The millionaire appeared, his once perfect suit torn and stained, his hair disheveled, his face pale with exhaustion and madness. But his eyes still burned, not with strength, but with the desperation of a man drowning. In his trembling hand, he clutched an old, rusted key, its handle engraved with symbols identical to those on the parchment. He staggered forward, his voice hoarse but venomous. "This house is mine," he hissed, spittle on his lips. "This fortune is mine. That door will open for me. For my blood, not hers." The stranger's voice was like iron. "Your blood is the reason the door was sealed. It will never open for you." The millionaire's face twisted with rage, his words breaking into manic laughter. "Then I'll force it. If not with the key, then with her blood. If she dies, the curse dies with her." He lunged forward, waving the rusted key like a weapon, his madness filling the cavernous room. The girl recoiled, but before he could reach her, the mansion itself roared. A thunderous groan ripped through the foundations, shaking the marble so violently that cracks splintered across the floor. The chandeliers above shattered, raining shards of glass that glittered like falling stars. The paintings of ancestors, once stern and proud, crashed from the walls, their frames snapping in half. The air grew thick, suffocating, charged with a force that pressed down on every chest. The millionaire stumbled, clutching his head as voices poured into the room. Not whispers this time. Shouts, screams, a cacophony of languages long dead, yet understood by every soul present. The sound rattled bones, churned stomachs, and clawed at the mind like talons. The girl collapsed to her knees, clutching her ears, though the voices were inside her, vibrating in her skull. Her own lips moved against her will, forming words she didn't recognize, her voice layered with 1,000 others. The stranger crouched beside her, gripping her shoulders firmly. "Fight it. They want you to break. Don't let them." Tears streamed down her face. Her body convulsed, her voice screaming in the ancient tongue. "It's inside me. I can't stop it." And then the door shuddered. The iron bands groaned, snapping one by one, the sound louder than the gunshots from the night before. Dust exploded outward, filling the air, choking lungs. The glow spilling from the cracks grew brighter, red now tinged with gold, like molten fire bleeding through. The heartbeat of the house pounded louder, shaking the walls, vibrating through every bone. The millionaire, driven by madness, stumbled toward the door, pressing the rusted key against it with all his strength. "Open to me," he screamed. "I am your heir. I am your master." But the door did not yield to him. Instead, it threw him back with a violent pulse of energy, hurling him across the ballroom. His body slammed into a marble pillar, blood spraying from his mouth. He crumpled to the floor, coughing, screaming, yet laughing through his broken teeth. "It's mine, still mine." The girl's body jerked, her voice rising again, no longer her own. The door pulsed brighter in response, the last band straining. The stranger pulled her into his arms, his voice fierce, his eyes blazing. "Listen to me. This is not your fate unless you choose it. You are not a slave to their lies. You decide what happens tonight." But the voices drowned him out. The girl's screams merged with them, filling the cavernous hall until the mansion itself seemed to tremble under the weight of her voice. Her eyes snapped open, glowing faintly, and she spoke in a voice layered with countless others. "The seal breaks now." The final iron band snapped. The door trembled, its surface splitting with a crack that split the air like lightning. The glow burst outward, blinding, searing. The stranger shielded her with his body, but the light consumed everything. And then, silence. When the glow dimmed, the door stood ajar, just wide enough for darkness to seep through like smoke. A cold wind blew from its depths, carrying with it the scent of earth, iron, and something older, something foul. The ballroom lay in ruins, marble cracked, chandeliers shattered, walls bleeding dust. The millionaire lay on the floor, laughing through bloodied lips. "It's open, it's finally open." The stranger pulled the girl to her feet, his grip steady despite the chaos. His voice was low, deadly serious. "Now comes the choice. You either seal it, or you let it consume him." The girl's chest heaved, her trembling hands lifting toward the door that breathed like a beast awakening. For the first time, she realized this was not just about her survival. It was about justice. It was about ending what his family had begun centuries ago. But to seal it meant sacrifice. To open it meant damnation. And the house would demand its answer before the night was through. The air turned colder as the crack in the ancient door widened, exhaling a chill that extinguished every candle and sconce in the ballroom. Only the glow from within remained, a faint red-gold pulse, as though something enormous slumbered beyond. The girl stood frozen, her eyes locked on the widening gap. Every breath, a trembling prayer she could not finish. The stranger's hand tightened on her shoulder, steadying her against the pole, but even his presence could not silence the roar that filled her mind. Thousands of voices chanting in unison, calling her deeper, dragging her closer. The millionaire, sprawled on the floor, coughed up blood but laughed through cracked lips. His laughter echoed grotesquely in the ruined ballroom, louder than it should have been, like the house itself carried it along its walls. He dragged himself upright against a pillar, his body broken, his suit torn, yet his eyes gleamed with fanaticism. "Yes," he whispered, his voice trembling with glee. "Yes, it opens for me. It opens for me at last." The stranger's voice cut like steel. "It is not opening for you. It's rejecting you." But the millionaire ignored him, staggering forward, each step leaving smears of blood across the cracked marble. He pressed his palm against the door, its glow illuminating his gaunt face. The moment his skin touched it, a hiss filled the room, like fire meeting water. The flesh of his hand blistered instantly, the stench of burning flesh curling into the air. He screamed, but even through the agony, he laughed, pressing harder. "Pain means nothing. This house is mine. It will always be mine." The girl's stomach twisted. She wanted to turn away, to shut her eyes, but she couldn't. The door didn't just glow, it moved. The wood rippled like living flesh, veins of light throbbing beneath its surface. Her breath caught as she realized the door wasn't simply a barrier. It was alive. Then, with a sound that split the air like a scream, the door opened further. A sliver became a gap wide enough for shadows to spill into the ballroom. They slithered across the cracked marble, black as ink but alive, writhing, stretching toward the guests who had not fled fast enough. One of the guards cried out as a shadow wrapped around his leg, dragging him toward the door. He clawed at the floor, his nails tearing from his fingers as he screamed. The others rushed forward to pull him back, but the moment their hands touched the shadow, they too were seized, their bodies yanked violently toward the darkness. In seconds, the three men vanished beyond the crack with a sickening snap of bone and a final scream cut short. The girl clutched her chest, gasping. The whispers in her head surged louder, clearer. "Blood debt. Unpaid. Claimed. Claimed." Her knees buckled, and she would have collapsed if not for the stranger holding her upright. His voice was low, fierce but calm. "Do not listen to them. They will use your fear against you." But the girl's lips trembled. "It's not fear. It's truth. I can hear them. The ones who built this house. The ones who died for it. They're calling." The stranger's jaw tightened. He looked at her, his eyes grim. "And what do they want?" Her tears glistened in the glow of the cursed door. Her voice was barely a whisper. "They want his blood." The millionaire's laughter cracked into a scream as more shadows lashed out, clawing at him, dragging him closer. But instead of resisting, he leaned into it, his face twisted with ecstasy and madness. "Take me then. If it costs me my soul, then so be it. The fortune remains mine. The empire remains mine." The girl cried out, unable to bear it. She stumbled toward the door despite the stranger's grip, her body shaking violently. "No, stop." The stranger seized her arm, pulling her back. "Do not step closer." Her voice broke into a sob. If it takes him, it takes all of us. That's what the prophecies said. What is built on blood will drown in blood. If the door consumes him, it won't stop. It will consume everything. The stranger's grip on her arm tightened. He turned her to face him, his eyes sharp, urgent. Then you must choose now. Seal it, or we'll feast until dawn. The girl's chest heaved, her hands trembling as she lifted them. She didn't know how she knew what to do, but the knowledge burned in her veins, the whispers guiding her steps. She was the key, the voice, the blood. Her very existence was both the lock and the weapon. But to seal it meant death. Her death. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she looked at the stranger. If I seal it, what will happen to me? His silence told her everything. The millionaire shrieked as the shadows wrapped around his chest, pulling him deeper. His eyes, wide with madness, locked on her. If I die, you die with me. We are bound to this house. You cannot escape. The door groaned wider. A wind howled from its depths, cold and fetid, scattering broken glass across the ballroom like shards of ice. The girl screamed as the whispers rose into a deafening roar inside her head. Seal. Sacrifice. Blood of arrogance. Blood of truth. One must fall. The stranger gripped her face between his hands, forcing her to look at him. Listen to me. This curse has lasted centuries because no one dared to choose. You can end it, but you must decide now. Do you lock it with your life, or do you let it consume his? Her heart pounded violently, her tears blinding her. She turned her gaze toward the door, where the millionaire was dragged screaming into the shadows, his laughter echoing grotesquely. His legacy, his arrogance, everything he was, being torn apart before her eyes. And then the whispers stopped. Silence fell so suddenly it choked the breath from her lungs. The door pulsed one last time, its glow flickering. It waited, not for him, for her. Her hand lifted on its own, trembling as she reached toward the living wood. The stranger's grip on her shoulder tightened. If you touch it, there is no going back. Her fingers hovered inches from the glowing surface, the cold emanating from it searing her skin. Her voice cracked, broken and raw, as she whispered, "What if I don't want either fate?" The stranger's eyes darkened. His voice was low, almost a plea. Then create a third. The girl's breath caught, her heart hammering. She had been mocked, humiliated, discarded. She was no one. And yet, in this moment, she held the power to decide not only her fate, but the fate of a dynasty built on blood and lies. And as the shadows hissed, as the millionaire's screams dissolved into silence behind the door, she realized, whatever choice she made, it would change everything. She closed her eyes. Her hand touched the door. The moment her trembling hand pressed against the living wood, the mansion roared as though the earth itself had awakened beneath it. The impact threw everyone off balance. The chandeliers clanged against their chains, shattered glass rattled like hail across the marble, and the walls wept dust in thick, choking clouds. The girl screamed, but her hand could not move away. The door had claimed her. Her vision went white, not from pain, but from memory, a flood of images not her own, crashing in her mind like waves against jagged stone. She saw generations of men in gilded halls, raising glasses, laughing as blood was spilled beneath their feet. She saw peasants dragged from their homes, their cries muffled by the sound of violins, their lives crushed to build this empire of wealth and cruelty. She saw the very foundation of the mansion laid not on stone, but on corpses, slaves, prisoners, innocents, all sacrificed to fuel a dynasty of arrogance. Her knees buckled, but the door held her upright. Her lips moved, and though she tried to scream, what came out was not her voice. We are the blood beneath the marble. We are the bones beneath the gold. We were promised justice, and justice has come. Her scream tore through the words, raw and human, but the voices drowned her. Tears streamed down her face as the truth seared itself in her chest. The fortune, the empire, the very house itself was soaked in innocent blood. The curse was not some vengeful ghost. It was the collective will of the murdered, those who had been silenced, demanding to be heard. Behind her, the stranger fought to hold her steady, his arms like iron around her waist. Listen to me. Do not let them take you. You are not their vessel. You are their judge. But the voices inside her head clawed at her thoughts, demanding, screaming, promising release if only she opened the door fully. And then she saw him. The millionaire, dragged to his knees by the shadows, his body torn by unseen claws. His face was twisted, not in dignity or defiance, but in sheer terror. His arrogance had melted into begging, his voice hoarse as he shrieked, "Save me! Please! You can stop this. You're the key. They'll listen to you. I'll give you everything. Money, power, a name, whatever you want, it's yours." The girl gasped, her chest heaving. For a fleeting moment, she saw herself accepting it. Silks, jewels, respect, all the things she had been denied. She could have it all if she let the door consume only him. But the stranger's voice cut through the illusion like a blade. "Do not be fooled. If you feed the curse, it will never stop. It will eat his line, then another, then another. It will use you until you are nothing but a shell." Her body shook violently, the whispers crawling down her spine like chains of fire. She clutched her head, her voice breaking. "If I seal it, it takes me. If I leave it, it takes the world. There's no way out." The stranger grabbed her face, forcing her to look into his eyes. His voice was low, urgent, steady. "There is always another way. Do not think like them. Think like you." Her breath trembled. Like me? She was no one. She had no power, no legacy, no fortune. All she had was the truth. And maybe that was enough. The girl raised her trembling hand against the door again. This time, she did not scream. She spoke. Her voice cracked at first, then steadied as words in the ancient tongue poured from her lips. Not given to her by the curse, but pulled from within her. Words she had learned, hidden in books, whispered in prayers, studied by candlelight when no one thought her worthy. "I'm not your heir. I'm not your sacrifice. I'm not your puppet. I am your ending." The shadows froze. The voices faltered. For the first time, the mansion seemed to hesitate. The millionaire thrashed, screaming, "And no, no, you cannot end it. You are nothing." The girl turned her gaze to him, tears streaking her face, but fire burning in her eyes. "Nothing is what you made me, and nothing is what destroys you." With a cry that shook the hall, she pressed both hands against the door and poured herself into it. Not her blood, not her life, but her truth. The weight of centuries slammed into her chest, the agony of thousands of voices clawing at her mind, but she refused to let them win. She forced her words louder, each one a strike against the curse. "The blood you spilled is not mine. The chains you forged are not mine. Your legacy ends here." The door screamed. Not the voices, the door itself. The glow flared violently, a blinding explosion of red and gold light flooding the ballroom. The shadows shrieked, dissolving like smoke and fire. The millionaire's screams rose higher, piercing, before they were swallowed entirely. His body convulsed, his laughter dying in his throat as the darkness ripped him apart. Not piece by piece, but from the inside out, his bloodline collapsing into nothing. His voice was gone, his name erased. The girl fell to her knees, the stranger catching her before she hit the floor. The door shook violently, its surface cracking, splintering, until it collapsed inward with a deafening roar. The light sucked into itself, vanishing into silence. And then nothing. The ballroom was still. The mansion's groaning ceased. The air grew lighter, as if the curse had exhaled its last breath. Dust drifted softly through beams of moonlight filtering from broken windows. The girl lay trembling in the stranger's arms, her chest rising shallowly, her lips parted as though every breath were borrowed. She whispered, her voice so faint it was barely audible, "Did I seal it?" The stranger's hand pressed against her hair, steadying her trembling form. His voice was low, reverent. "You didn't seal it. You ended it." Her body sagged against him, exhausted, her tears soaking into his shirt. For the first time, silence was not terrifying, it was freedom. But as she drifted into unconsciousness, the stranger's eyes lingered on the broken remains of the door. His jaw tightened, because though the mansion was quiet, though the shadows had retreated, he knew curses did not die so easily. Somewhere, Deep in the silence of the earth, something still listened. The silence after the collapse of the door was suffocating. The grand ballroom, once a temple of arrogance and laughter, now resembled a grave. The chandeliers lay shattered on the marble, their crystals glimmering like broken stars. Portraits of ancestors, their painted eyes forever proud, lay face down in dust and ruin. The air smelled of ash, old wood, and something else. A stillness so absolute it seemed unnatural, as though the house itself was holding its breath. The stranger remained on his knees, the girl trembling in his arms. Her skin was pale, slick with sweat, her chest rising and falling shallowly. Every breath looked like it might be her last. He pressed his ear close to her lips, relief softening his expression as he caught the faintest whisper of breath. Her eyes fluttered open, heavy with exhaustion. "It's over," she breathed, though her voice was barely there. He hesitated before answering. "The curse is broken. The door is gone. The bloodline is ended." His jaw tightened, his voice lowering, more to himself than to her. But endings like this always leave shadows. She swallowed hard, her throat dry. "He's gone." The stranger nodded once. His eyes flicked toward the far side of the room, where the millionaire had been consumed. There was no body, no ashes, nothing but a blackened stain on the marble, as if the shadows had devoured him whole, erasing not just his life, but his legacy. The girl shivered. The thought of him, arrogant, cruel, untouchable, vanishing into nothing unsettled her more than the screams had. She closed her eyes, whispering, "He got what he deserved." "Yes," the stranger said, his voice steady, but there was no triumph in it, only weariness. As the minutes stretched into hours, the mansion remained still. The whispers were gone, the tremors had ceased, and yet the girl could not shake the feeling that unseen eyes lingered in the cracks, in the shadows, in the silence itself. She had ended the curse, but something remained, something that waited. The stranger helped her to her feet, his hand steady at her back. "You should leave this place. Tonight, before it tries to claim you again." She looked around at the wreckage, at the ruins of arrogance and wealth. "Where would I go? I have nothing." He turned to her, his expression unchanging, but his tone softer. "You have truth, and truth weighs more than gold." Her lips trembled. "But truth doesn't feed me. It doesn't shelter me." His gaze lingered on her, as if searching her face for something he could not name. "No, but it sets you free. And freedom is worth more than all he ever owned." She looked at the broken door, the stain on the marble, the shattered remnants of a dynasty built on lies. Slowly, she nodded. "Then I'll go. I'll leave this house and never return." He inclined his head, satisfied. But just as they turned toward the great doors of the mansion, a sound froze them both. A whisper, not from the walls, not from the floor, from her. Her body stiffened, her eyes wide with terror. The voice that left her lips was not hers, not human. "We are not finished." The stranger spun her toward him, gripping her shoulders tightly. "Fight it. Do not let them stay in you." Her body shook violently, her nails digging into her palms as she struggled. Her eyes brimmed with tears as she gasped. "I ended it. I did. Why won't they let me go?" The stranger's jaw tightened, his expression grim. "Because curses are not destroyed, they are transformed. You didn't end them. You absorbed them." Her breath caught. She stumbled back, shaking her head violently. "No, no, I won't be their vessel. I won't." He stepped closer, his voice urgent but calm. "Then choose now. Either carry them or cast them out. But if you cast them out, they will not return to the door. They will return to the world." Her tears fell hot against her cheeks. The weight in her chest grew heavier, the whispers clawing at her mind, demanding, begging, promising power, vengeance, immortality. She clutched her head, screaming, "I don't want this." The stranger's voice lowered to a whisper, steady and deliberate. "Then give it back to the blood that deserves it." Her eyes widened. She understood. Her gaze snapped to the blackened stain on the marble, the last remnant of the millionaire's existence. The whispers screamed inside her, furious, resisting, but she forced her trembling body forward. She collapsed to her knees over the stain, pressing her hands against the cold marble. Her voice cracked as she spoke in the ancient tongue, every word burning her throat. What is built on blood shall return to blood. You are not mine to carry. You are his. The mansion erupted in a roar. The stain flared with violent light, shadows erupting like smoke, clawing, shrieking as they tore themselves free of her body. She screamed with them, her back arching, her hands searing against the marble. The stranger held her steady, his own face grim as the air grew thick with centuries of rage. And then silence. The shadows vanished into the stain, which smoldered briefly before fading into nothing. The marble was clean. The whispers were gone, truly gone. The girl collapsed into the stranger's arms, unconscious, her face streaked with tears, but peaceful at last. He lifted her gently, carrying her through the ruined ballroom, past the broken chandeliers, past the fallen portraits, past the remnants of a dynasty that had fed on blood until blood claimed it back. When the grand doors opened, the night air rushed in, cool and clean. The crowd that had gathered outside gasped, stepping back in awe as they saw him carrying her. Whispers rose, not of curses now, but of survival, of miracles. He did not speak to them. He carried her down the steps, past the gates, into the night. The mansion loomed behind them, silent, broken, hollow. And for the first time in centuries, it truly slept. The girl awoke days later in a small inn on the edge of the city. The stranger sat by her bedside, silent as ever. She blinked, her throat dry, her body weak. "Am I free?" she whispered. His gaze lingered on her for a long moment. Finally, he nodded. "Yes, you are free, and so is the world." Her tears fell silently. For the first time, they weren't born of pain, or humiliation, or fear. They were tears of relief. The stranger rose, placing his cloak over his shoulders. "This is where we part." Her hand reached weakly for his. "Wait, will I ever see you again?" His eyes softened, though his lips never curved into a smile. "If fate calls, but pray it does not." And with that, he vanished into the dawn. The girl sat up slowly, her heart heavy but alive. She was no longer the humiliated girl mocked in a ballroom. She was the voice that had ended centuries of blood, the key that had chosen truth over vengeance. She had nothing, no wealth, no family, no legacy, and yet, as she gazed out the window at the rising sun, she realized she had something greater. Freedom. And for the first time, that was enough. And so, her story reminds us that no curse, no arrogance, and no empire built on lies can ever stand against the power of truth. Because in the end, when everything else falls apart, only God's justice prevails. If you believe that truth always finds its way, then make sure to subscribe right now. Because here, every week, we bring stories that prove how life can change in a single moment. And tell me in the comments, from which city are you watching this video? I want to know where this story has reached.